Hey, everybody. Welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox, coming at you for the week of February 14th through the 21st. We are still moving through that difficult integrating, wrapping up month. Not as deep as January, but lots of stuff being put together with Venus and Mercury moving through their wrap-up shadow piece. So I'm just going to start today's podcast with a little tiny bit about Mercury and his movement, because something actually happens today, the 14th, where he's going to enter Aquarius once again, right? He started his retrograde in Aquarius and then backed up into Capricorn. And so the juicy parts of his retrograde journey did take place when he was in Capricorn, hanging out with Pluto, because that was the same territory that Venus, is in her retrograde cycle. So there's actually a kind of relief experience that we're going to have just by virtue of today, Aquarius receiving Mercury's entrance, and a shift in how we think and how we communicate. We're still in the wrap-up, kids. We're still putting stuff together that might harken back to the last bunch of weeks and his backward motion when we were bumping into things. And I will certainly talk a little bit about that in next week's podcast when Mercury does this sort of final triple transit. It's a little sextile to Chiron, which means it's a healing experience. And then he finishes up completely. That's next week. This week, understand that as of today, communication is a little more intuitive, a little more out of the box and inspired in how we think and process, because that's the nature of Mercury in Aquarius. And I think that will bring some relief from some of the heaviness that's been happening because of so many cycles involving the Capricorn mansion. So I'm actually think this is a welcome ingress. And when we meet next week, I'll talk all about Mercury completing his wrap-up cycle, and we will be in some free and clear communication. But that's next week.
Does that mean everything's out of Capricorn now?
Oh, no, honey. Nothing's out of Capricorn but Mercury.
Oh.
Not nothing, meaning Pluto is still in Capricorn, which is why all the deep changes and transformations have been happening this whole decade and, a few years from now. Venus is still there. Mars has entered, and that's, in fact, what we're going to talk about next. So first, a little bit of a correction. I'm not even sure how I saw this in the way that I saw it, but last week's podcast, when I talked about the fact that Mars was going to catch up with Venus, I think I indicated that they would be hanging out for about 7 days. Well, that was an error, guys. I don't even know how I came up with that stat. But we are, in fact, in a very interesting process where Mars catching up with Venus today is actually going to be with us for weeks. Venus is moving slowly because she's still amping up from her retrograde posture. So she's not at her regular fast pace. Mars is. So Mars catching up with Venus today has some great significance, which I'm going to talk all about in a moment. But first, I wanted to just clear up the idea that the power that we are going to benefit from of having the planet that governs our emotional process, having just done a thing, visiting the below places, and helping us learn a little bit more about how we approach love and intimacy, where we might be blocking ourselves. And we did a lot of that uncovering while Venus was moving backwards. Well, now that she's moving forward, we're in the wrap-up place. We're in the putting it back together and having, hopefully, a better understanding about how we each live in our hearts. But Mars coming along is an incredible boon to us because Mars is the planet of embodiment. Mars is the planet that can take something new that we've learned emotionally and turn it into behaviors that come from that healed worthiness place as opposed to where we might have been a few months ago before this backward journey process. So starting today, there are going to be ways over the next, I'll just call it, say, 3 weeks or so, where we are going to organically and naturally be able to make new choices and decisions that come from a different place in how we feel about things. Might be as simple as you now know a little bit more about how you feel about something that's intimate and important and high stakes to you, that you can now, in fact, make a decision based on what your feelings are about something. Perhaps Mars coming together with Venus will offer you the decision-making moment at some point over the next couple of weeks that will just be different in how you choose because you know more about how you feel. Because Venus is moving so slowly, this meetup between Mars and Venus, which happens every couple of years and usually takes maybe 4 or 5 days to play out in total, is with us really for the next 3 weeks. In fact, between now and March 5th, they hang out degree to degree to degree to degree. They just keep moving together. They're like holding hands after today. And between now and the end of the month, they're still together, and they finish their passage through Capricorn and enter the next mansion together and start moving through Aquarius for at least 4 or 5 days into March before they then begin to separate. So that means 3 weeks of a natural process where we're going to see how our decision-making gets to shift and change because we have more emotional awareness. And then the new moon at the very top of March will kind of close this entire chapter of both Venus and Mercury in their retrograde, and we get to sort of move forward completely integrated in a brand new way. And in some ways, that process of embodiment starts today. I know I like to say that every new moon or every full moon is the most important or the biggest we've ever had. Hey, listen, if you're new to me and my podcast, I have to qualify my hyperbolic language. If you're familiar with me, you just know that everything is the biggest and the bestest. Then I always stop and say, wait a minute, I really mean it. And what I really mean with regard to this particular full moon is that all full moons allow us to release things that our unconscious has been holding tether to. The moon is always connected to our unconscious experience. During the full moon, it's as if the most light of our conscious awareness that is possible to shine into our unconscious spaces. That's what's happening in every full moon. That's why it makes sense that the archetype of a full moon says we can let go of things that are ready to be released because we're shining a little flashlight into the unconscious. That light of the full moon is allowing us to see under the surface just enough to find the patterns or the habits or the unconscious material that we can just go snip. That's ready to be dropped. Why this one feels so important is because of January and February's double retrograde experience and the deep personal processes that we've all been in because the personal planets are kind of on fire. And Leo is the archetype of personal self-expression, personal sense of leadership, and taking the gifts and talents that you own and shining them brightly in the world. So you can't have a Leo full moon that says you are all that and a bag of chips without being able to also let go of and release anything that inhibits your ability to shine up your light and feel confident and exuberant that you know what your gifts are and you let them shine in the Leonian kind of way. When the sun is in Aquarius, we are thinking about the community, what the community needs and how it's structured and how we fit into it. Therefore, Leo's opposite place in the polarity of Aquarius and Leo says, okay, well, who am I in my great sovereignty sense of self? But more importantly, how does that fit into the community? It's a beautiful moment where we get to both celebrate ourselves, but also understand that the celebration of ourself is to know how we fit into the community. And because I'm all about service, living a life of service and serving the community through that principle of living a life of service, this is like my full moon. Not only because I'm a Leo sun and Venus and this full moon happens to be hitting me very directly, it's an opportunity for all of us to focus on what do we give and bring that is uniquely ours, and then how do we serve the community, and how do we let go of anything that inhibits our own sense of magnificence. Because Venus and Mars are now hanging out together, part of what will facilitate a richer sense of knowing what is yours to lift up and celebrate and knowing what is yours to let go of because it's not serving you any longer will be made much more gentle, easy, and graceful because we're having this integration experience. Our masculine principle and feminine principle is together. Up in the cosmos, that looks like Mars and Venus at the same place. But remember, if it's happening out there, it's also happening in here, meaning inside of all of us. Whether we can feel this or not, you're just going to have to trust me that it's happening. That's the beauty of astrology. If it happens up there, we're all having some experience of integrating how we feel and knowing how we feel more accurately because we've allowed the process to open us up, and being directly able to put actionable steps into what we desire because we know what it is that we desire with more emotional clarity. One of the other important things about this full moon is its geometrical relationship to the nodes of the moon. Hopefully, you've been listening to the podcast enough to know with some shorthand that as we enter this year, the points that represent or reflect the direction of the collective, the north node of the moon is the direction we're all heading in together. And the north node moving backward into Taurus means that our ultimate goal is to find more love. Taurus, Venus ruled, love is key with Taurus. That's how we are to drive the collective forward. So if you're someone who's listening to this podcast, then you understand the principles of going first, of being the way shower, of lifting up love and light and saying, hey guys, come this way. This is the way to have an experience where there can be more love on the planet. That's the essence of the North Node having moved into Taurus over the last couple of months. And this lunation has a square shape made between where the sun and the moon are in opposition and where the north and the south node are in opposition, are an exact square right now. They divide the circle into 4 parts. What that means for us is that this is not a comfortable, smooth, and easy full moon to navigate. Squares mean conflicts, obstacles, becoming aware of problems. So this full moon might actually illuminate more stuff you got to work on because of its setup says if you want to move forward, you got to learn this lesson. That's the nature of a square. If you want to let go of the past, you got to learn this lesson. So while it's a beautiful moment of celebrating the wins and letting go of that which keeps you from flying a bright flag of exuberant joy in your life. There are definitely more lessons to process. And truthfully, this makes sense because we've got like another 5-6 days of Mercury wrapping up his cycle and another 2.5 weeks of Venus doing the same. Because we're not done with the process. This is just a full moon that illuminates, I think, partly what's possible, what's happening. What is the value of all of this difficult work? It's ultimately so that we can rise up in a self-expressive, creative sense of who we are and what we bring, Leo, and understand how we fit that into the needs of the community, Sun in Aquarius. I want to finish out today's astrology section of the podcast by talking a little bit about something that Pluto is doing. Two things, really. One is the Pluto return of the chart for the United States of America is beginning this month. Pluto will return to the exact place he was in July of 1776. 3 times in 2022. The first one is this month. Ironically, I think it's crazy that this happens essentially on President's Day. So this is in some ways a next week thing. So I'm going to go into more detail about it next week's podcast.
That's so poetic.
Yes, the craziness of that. So if you've been listening to me for a while, I've talked about this a lot, but you may not have heard me go into depth. Not enough time to do that this week, so I will go into a little more depth at next week's podcast about the Pluto return and about the fact that Pluto is also trining the north node of the moon, which means we're kind of at an apex of what I'll call a 2-year process of the world and the collective moving in a brand new direction because of all the change and transformation taking place on the planet. And that peaks essentially the same day. So when you have a country like the United States, where the Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal in a land that was cleared of all of its indigenous population through murder and genocide, and a country built on the backs of enslaved people, that is a fundamental untruth that we are now unpacking 250 years later. I'll talk again a little bit more in depth about this next week, but understand, kids, we're living in quite a time of change and transformation, and here we are. So have at it.
All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have our call-in dreamer, Christy. Christy, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have a bird enthusiast on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I don't know if I'm an expert on birds, but I certainly enjoy them and feed them lots of things and watch them and all the like.
Where are you calling in from?
So I am just south of Buffalo, New York.
Awesome. Well, welcome.
Snowbelt.
Yes, it's sunny today. It's sunny and beautiful before the next storm.
And so in your waking life, you do like to watch birds?
Yep. I have several bird feeders. I have one just for blue jays. That's peanuts. And so that's good fun. And so, yeah, I do this pretty regularly. Yeah.
Wow. Like how long would you say in your life have you been sort of either actively interested in watching birds or just curious and loving of them?
my entire life, both my mother and my grandmother we have a summer cottage and they both always fed the birds, watched the birds. And that's kind of how I learned about birds. So that's been my entire life. But just as an adult, maybe the last 10 or so years, I myself have invested in, bird feeders and the like, and kind of really spent time getting to understand and the species better and all that kind of thing. So.
And how often would you say you dream about birds?
I was going through some dream journals today because I really wanted to get a sense. And I had one last week. I had one the week before that. And I didn't find anything profound for a few months prior, but I would say it's at least several times a year. Yeah.
Wow. That's frequent enough to have this be what I would call a dream theme.
Yeah.
People have dream themes. Not every dreamer, but having listened to enough dreamers consistently, like people who would come regularly to dream circles and whatnot, I would hear dreams, or clients that I would work with over time. It's not uncommon for someone to glom on to one either image or one particular scenario and have that be the style of frequent dreaming.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah, I have community dreams. I'm in a community. That means like a house or a home where many people live, or it's a town where I am, this kind of thing. Sure. And I remember someone reading my human design over dinner about a month or two ago, and they said something that in my human design was like, well, you're very focused on how you relate to community. And I thought, that's my dream theme, right?
You probably have the tribal circuit strong.
Oh, a little human design, do you? All right. So I want to start with this before we even dive into specific dreams that maybe we'll unpack and look at, is that your lifelong connection to birds has also entered your unconscious as something that will get your attention.
Okay.
That movie Inside Out, I think it was a Pixar movie about the girl and her inner monologue. They talk a lot about dreams in that movie. And it's very accurate from a technical place and also a psychological place. This idea that we have themes that speak to us and they show up in our dreams because we're oriented to understand the landscape. And what's beautiful about birds is that the animal medicine with birds is always going to be about messages and ideas and things that get delivered us from higher levels of thought. Because birds fly. The air that they fly in is akin to our intellectual nature. The elements have meaning, right? So water dreams are all about emotions, and flying dreams and air dreams connect to higher thoughts, and higher because flying offers vantage point.
Okay.
If you look back at many traditions in First Nations communities, birds were often messengers. We go there first. But of course, this is going to be really powerful when someone is a kind of pedestrian dreamer and then they have a bird dream. It's like, oh my God, you've just met some of your medicine.
Right.
And while that might not be your story, you're certainly oriented towards this image to know that you're getting messages from higher places in your psyche whenever you have a bird dream.
Okay. Interesting.
So you wrote to us about some specific bird dreams, didn't you?
Yes. I had one dream last week that sort of stood out. It kind of prompted me to write. Okay. So I was standing in my kitchen. So that's kind of my vantage point for doing most of my bird watching. And I noticed there were some puddles in the grass and some birds. There was like 3 birds kind of frolicking in the water. And I thought, are there ducks in my yard? Like, this is kind of weird. And so I was looking and I could just make out they were kind of flipping through the water. And I could notice that it was greenish in color and it had a red spot on the bird's head. So I thought, okay, well, this is weird. And then as they moved, one of them actually came into my kitchen. And it was kind of weird in the dream. I have like glass sliding doors and the bird came through the doors, didn't break or anything. And the door wasn't open. And it landed in a paper bag that we have set up for recycling in the kitchen. And it was a pheasant. And I was like, what? It's a pheasant. So there was a pheasant in this recycling bag. So my daughter was with me and we both sort of were like, oh my God, we got to get this bird out because we have 2 terriers who would have probably tried to eat it or something. So we were scrambling to get the bird outside, but we were laughing and it was just felt really joyful. So that was my pheasant dream. that happened.
Well, what I love about the idea, well, this is my pheasant dream, because to me, it's your kitchen dream.
Okay.
Right? It starts in the kitchen. What's the kitchen in the home? It's your heart and lungs. It's where everything gets fed and nourished.
Okay.
It's where everybody hangs out in a party. The reason is it's the symbolic room where everything is warmed and fed.
Okay.
So it's like I'm in the center of my heart and I can see through this window, right? The window in waking life is your vantage point to see the birds. But in dream landscape, it's what you can see when you're grounded in your heart.
Okay.
So we're looking out at the world to get some sort of message. And what do we see? Well, we see puddles in the grass. That's some evidence of emotional content. Water in dreams is our emotional nature. These 3 birds aren't overwhelmed with the water. They're playing in it. They're frolicking. One message right there is, though some deep emotions have happened, we have to say have happened because the puddle in the grass is what I call an ipso facto, meaning we know that it rained in the past because there's puddles. So if the dream puddle is evidence of recent emotional flow, 3 birds frolicking the water is like your higher nature. 3 is a powerful numerological number about primal creativity. Then the frolicking moment in the dream says to me, though life is filled with emotion, or I might have just come through an emotional process, I can actually benefit. I can learn something. I can gain something. And it can be a playful act.
Okay.
Greenish in color with a red spot on the head. If we go to colors now, green is the color of the heart chakra. Red is the color of the root chakra that speaks to, are my needs met? Am I safe? So a green bird says, I'm in my heart chakra. Red spots on the head says this medicine has thoughts about head, my safety, my needs met, my groundedness, my root chakra. And then one of them comes into the kitchen, into your hearth, into your heart of your home, and says, I can actually be recycled. I can turn into something else. I can be saved and met. That's the recycling bag. The recycling bag is to do the responsible thing that says something I might be done with needs to be processed and moved on.
Wow. That's kind of interesting.
Now, the last piece of all of this, so that's what the dream, so you say it's a pheasant dream or a bird dream, but to me, it's about, I'm in my heart center, I'm seeing what's possible, I'm playing in emotional processes without challenge, I'm living in my heart, but aware of what I need and my needs getting met, and that this is available to come right into my heart, and I have a fundamental understanding of this is a continual process where something comes up, and I can let it go, and it can benefit someone else. Now we have to decide what the hell we want to interpret the pheasant to mean.
Yeah, the pheasant.
Why pheasant? So this is something interesting about animal totem meetings and where do you go to find them? There are websites. I use one called, I think it's animal-medicine.org, I think. That occasionally, if I'm working with somebody, I might look up pheasant.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. You look at one place and it says one thing. You look somewhere else, it says another. You have a book on your shelf and it says something completely different. So then one has to ask, well, what's the real meaning and how do you count on the real meaning?
Sure.
2 things that I want to say about this. One is, if you know a little bit about birds and you're not afraid of a little research, the best way to determine the medicine that might be associated with an animal is to consider what they do, how they operate, what's their way in the natural world. Because meaning that's symbolic comes from that.
Sure.
I mean, In the old days, you could find an ancient dream dictionary where, and I think I've used this joke because I saw it once, that a yellow bird means that your mother-in-law is coming to visit. That's not the universal meaning that I'm thinking about,
Sure.
But there's something that is part of consciousness unfolding that to me says one is led exactly where one needs to be led. So that if you go to this website and it says pheasants are about, play or expression, and I looked it up and I was like, oh, look, pheasants, because they're colorful. Mm-hmm. That one meaning was about their plumage reflecting a symbolic meaning of it's time to strut your stuff. Mm-hmm. But pheasants are also a bird that we eat. So pheasants could also connect to nurturance or sustenance, and pheasant would be considered a more foodie-like food. That could be something there. Or you could know something about pheasant that would lead you to a whole other idea of why pheasant.
Can I interrupt with just one tidbit of information? So after I had the dream, I kind of did what you suggested. I have like multiple animal oracle decks, and I have a book that, was a great book. I couldn't find anything really on the pheasant. It seemed like an unusual thing, but what I did find was that it's a part of the chicken family. And my maiden name is Hens. So I was like, after the fact, I was like, oh my God.
Oh, for my money, Christy, 100%.
Yeah.
The brain is very economical and loves a good pun.
Yeah.
Pheasants are fowl. Fowl is a primary way we relate to the bird community as human beings. Your last name puts you in the fowl family.
Yeah, yeah.
So if your journey of this dream led you to the perfect place for a piece of information, and that's what you got, and then you made the association with your maiden name of Hens, mm-hmm. Now we've got your perfect journey put you in front of the exact right piece of information. And then even you writing the email to us makes my interpretation perfect for you, because here I am.
Agreed. I didn't even think about the kitchen and the recycling or any of those elements that came up. I was more stuck on the bird.
Right. You just thought of the birds,
right? Yeah.
Your experience of the dream led you on a journey that I would never have said, I think this dream has to do with your old last name. Right. You see, there's a perfection in where we are led in every moment that we are alive. And this is why my moniker is conscious embodiment.
Yes.
Because your body will lead you to the right and perfect place to get the right and perfect information that you need at any given time.
Yes, I love it.
Are there birds that show up more frequently than others, or ones that you see regularly?
Yeah, I would say it's a mixed bag, but the most often I think I see woodpeckers. Pileated, especially the big ones that look like Woody Woodpecker.
They're red, aren't they?
They have the red head and they're black and white. Yeah, besides.
Interesting. All right. Woodpeckers, are the noisemaker. Mm-hmm. Right? We're aware of them. So when a woodpecker comes up, there's like a message being shouted at you to get, right? Mm-hmm. And the red on the head is also root chakra and, needs met. Mm-hmm. So you have enough sort of fortitude with what you vibe with what birds are and led to, doing your investigation. That's what you want to do every time a bird comes up in a dream, is do a little investigating and some sense of who is this bird based on what their behavior is?
Sure. Yeah, that makes great sense.
Yeah.
This is very helpful. Thank you.
Hey, I'm so glad you came on the show. Thanks so much for coming.
All right. Thank you.
What's up, listeners? It's Zoe here to remind you of a special offer that we have just for you. Until February 28th, you can head over to llewellyn.com and receive a 20% discount on all of your purchases. Llewellyn is the world's oldest and largest independent publisher for books on mind, body, and spirit, and it's where Michael houses his books on dreams. So head over to llewellyn.com, that's LLEWELLYN.com. And when you hit checkout, type in LENNOX20 for 20% off on your purchase. Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.